It was the Wild West, and there were tumbleweeds and gunshots everywhere. Behind the fancy doors of a busy brothel, a clear sin thrived during a time when the law wasn't respected. It became well known on the border where these shady businesses set up shop. Let's find out how the women, who wore silk gloves and had iron fists, got through the sexy past that made the Wild West the desired but dangerous frontier. Here is the horrific truth about brothels during the Wild West. The rise. The growth of places to go out at night in the Wild West from the middle to the end of the 1800s was an interesting social occurrence. During the rough time called the Wild West, businesses run by strong women called madams grew. These businesses, which were sometimes called brothels, or more romantically, houses of nighttime entertainment, were places where tired tourists, miners, and frontiersmen could meet up. There are a mix of past events and social conditions that led to the start of these businesses. California's gold rush in 1848, which brought in a lot of mostly male prospectors looking for money, was very important. This gave schools a chance to meet the prospectors' needs for privacy and companionship. Artoy, an American lady who was born in Cantonese, was one of the first people to work as a fortune teller. She opened her business in San Francisco in 1849 to serve the city's growing number of people looking for money. Around the same time, the Homestead Act of 1862 caused a huge number of people to move west. This led to the growth of boomtowns, which often didn't have established social systems. This made it easy for evening businesses to start up. Evening entertainment houses did very well in this loose environment, which captured the spirit of the Wild West. Life behind closed doors. In the Wild West, the evening houses showed an interesting side of life behind closed doors. This society, which was often misunderstood, had a lot of different people and habits that made up its rhythms. They showed how complicated and changing things were in these places on a normal day. Their operations at night had a big effect on the events. As the sun went down, these houses came to life and were ready to welcome people who were looking for peace and company. The well-known madam ran these institutions, and her job was more than just that of a usual owner. This was the personality of Fanny Porter, a well-known woman from San Antonio, Texas. Fanny was known for having her house clean and friendly, and she had strict rules about how clients should treat the women, like being polite and respectful. There were many people working in her business, including musicians who played a symphony of melodies to set the mood and bartenders who made strong drinks to ease people's nerves. But the ladies of the evening were the real stars of the show. In these homes, people lived together and competed with each other. Even though they shared room and were often seen as competitors, the ladies of the night formed close bonds of sisterhood. Sharing living spaces and having similar situations led to connections that went beyond work relationships. This sense of community was clear in the story of Belle Brezing from Lexington, Kentucky. She raised the standard of living for the women who lived with her after taking over an evening home from a friend who was dying. In contrast to the chaos outside, these restaurants kept a certain amount of order. People who came in were expected to be polite and follow the rules set by the women. In order to keep things orderly in the wild frontier towns, madams often had a list of house rules that customers had to follow. The house cared a lot about the women's health, and doctors came in regularly to check on them and give them some protection against illnesses that were popular at the time. Madame Dora Duan of Deadwood, South Dakota, was known for taking great care of the health and safety of the women she looked after. Everyday life in these places at night was spiced up with funny and enjoyable times. Jokes that were told well made people laugh. A woman dancing a famous dance got cheers, and a customer playing the piano to great acclaim. Different origins. All of the ladies of the night came from different places and had their own unique paths that went far beyond the homes they visited. The women always told stories about Big News Kate, whose real name is Mary Catherine Horony. It was well known that Kate was friends with the famous shooter Doc Holliday. Both of her parents died when she was young, and that was the start of her journey. Kate's tumultuous relationship with Holliday became part of the history of the Wild West. Even though she had an exciting youth, Kate lived a quiet life in Arizona until she died in 1940. Artoi's trip from China to California during the gold rush in the 1850s, on the other hand, is very interesting. Even though she didn't speak English and was black, Artoi made it through the rough courts and streets of San Francisco and became one of the city's most famous ladies of the evening. In spite of what most people think, the choice to join the trade wasn't always made under pressure. For some, like Fanny Porter, who ran one of the busiest houses in San Antonio, Texas, it meant the chance to be financially independent, which was very appealing in a time when women didn't always have many choices. Fanny started out as a prostitute and became one of the most famous madams in the West. When these women moved out, they went through a lot of different things. Elena Dumont opened a gaming business. Because of her unique facial features, people called her Madame Mustache. Many people were able to completely change their lives. For example, Laura Evans went from being a teenage prostitute to running a successful business, a boarding house, and fighting for women's rights and safety. Soiled doves. People who were called soiled doves were an important part of life in border towns. Many times, these ladies of the evening were confused and left out, but they helped the tired and lonely by being there for them and making a living in the dust and dreams of the Wild West. In the loud saloons and game rooms, the women of the night, who were sometimes called soiled doves, were symbols of strength and rebellion. No one liked them, but people wanted their skills, so they painted a picture that was as difficult as the time it was set in. In the 1860s, during the gold rush, an English woman named Chicago Jo Hensley came to Helena, Montana. She became one of the most famous of these women. From being a lady of the evening to running many venues, Chicago Jo showed strength and business sense, which helped the town's economy grow. People had, at best, mixed views about these women. Even though they were friendly, they were often looked down upon because their job was seen as necessary evil, and they were kept in restricted areas away from nice parts of town. They were accepted into society, and both their presence and their roles were honored. There were many problems on the way to becoming a dirty dove, such as the constant fear of getting sick and the chance of getting hurt by angry customers. They were picked on by others, but they kept their heads up and overcame problems with grit and determination. Diamond Jessie Heyman, a famous soiled dove, said, "We are not the dregs of society, but the women who defy it." This quote says it all. One example is the story of Diamond Jessie. After getting rich in the Klondike Gold Rush, she gave her money to people in need and became a charity. These women embodied the spirit of the Wild West. They forged their own paths while navigating the rules and biases of a society that both needed and looked down on them. Diamond Jessie said it best, "We, the soiled doves, are not just the night's companions. We are its custodians, its secret keepers, and in many ways, its heart unseen." As the curtain goes up on another part of the Wild West's long history, shadows move and dress. There is a part that we don't know much about, but is still interesting to us. With this story, we learn about the men who dressed as women, breaking the lines between men and women in a Western brothel. In a frontier play, they played parts that were both strange and interesting. For the first time, this method was seen in action in 1849 during the gold rush in San Francisco. In a world where men were more common than women, loneliness and the need for company carved out a unique space. Men, who often had softer looks or were good at performing, took on feminine roles, not to trick people, but to give lonely miners and adventurers a false sense of female company. Squinted Sue, a very interesting person, pretended to be a lady of the evening at the El Dorado Saloon, giving people peace and pleasure. Squinted Sue's story shows how flexible social norms were in the Wild West, where people often broke the rules to stay alive and be creative. People in these situations didn't just dress like women. They often accepted their identities with a passion that went beyond the establishment. Many of them became part of the community and took part in the celebrations and events. In the late 1860s, Fernando was a well-known figure in Virginia City, Nevada. He was known for convincingly impersonating female beauty and charm, and he became a regular at community events. Most of the guys who did this did it because they thought it would help them get a job, but some did it for personal reasons as well. In the 1870s, Jean Bonnet came to America from France. He was physically female, but dressed and lived as a man most of the time. He broke social norms by both what he wore and by trying to save the ladies of the evening. Societal impact. The impact of brothels spread not only through the luxurious rooms inside, but also through society and the economy at the time. These businesses were essential to the survival of many villages, helping new communities grow. As a result of the gold rush in 1849, many men moved to the West in search of money and a fresh start. There were ladies of the night among them who saw a chance to make a lot of money. Even though women in these boomtowns are pity, Virginia City, Nevada, during the Comstock Lode silver strike of the 1850s, was a striking case. Julia Bulette, a famous woman, ran a business that made a lot of money and was one of the richest in town. Her luxurious room showed how these kinds of businesses could make money, which was very good for the city's growth. In the Old West, it cost a lot of money to run a brothel, and it cost even more to run a private house. At the time, prostitution was mostly against the law, so madams had to pay fines and fees every month to keep their businesses open. For houses that served alcohol, the need to get liquor licenses was an extra problem. It's interesting that the sex trade helped many local businesses, such as liquor stores, grocery stores, furniture stores, dress shops, music stores, hospitals, and doctors. This part of Madame Rochelle Urban's business made her happy in Park City, Utah. When people tried to close down the red light area, she talked to a local official in a smart way. Urban thought that if she wasn't there, workers would look for company somewhere else, which would lead to more absences and less work getting done at the mine. Her efforts paid off, and the red light area stayed a major gathering place for people. In Seattle during the Great Depression, Madame Lou Graham used her money to help people in need. Graham showed that madams' power reached outside of their institutions, which helped save decent businesses and banks. Legal and health concerns. The stories of the Wild West were full of both love and danger, and the strange businesses that happened at night, which people like to call nightly nests, were no different. These businesses were in a strange double bind, as they were on the edge of what was legal, what the law said, and the often overlooked area of health problems. In the Wild West, different areas had very different laws about prostitutes, which showed how the police felt about them in general. They worked almost freely in places like San Francisco during the gold rush in the 1850s, which brought in a lot of money for the city. But in places like Cheyenne, Wyoming, where they lived, it was only partly legal because police sometimes turned a blind eye out of necessity or for personal gain. Sheriff Seth Bullock of Deadwood, Dakota Territory, was known for his unique approach, which let these businesses stay open because they were so important to the economy. The health environment in these nocturnal nests was often ignored because it was seen as an inevitable risk to the business. Many of the women who worked in these institutions knew about the common diseases that came with their job. This was made worse by living close to each other and not knowing how illnesses spread. Even with these problems, some madams, like Maddie Silks in Colorado, took the initiative to make the workplace safer for women by giving them basic medical care and education. In her 1888 book, The Silent Sorrows, Dr. Linda King writes about health problems that happen in brothels. She sees how the soft light of the parlor and the silent strength of the ladies of the night hide a harsh reality. Many of the things that madams did showed how persistent and creative these women were as they tried to balance their business goals with the well-being of their employees. In the 1880s, something happened in Tombstone, Arizona, that showed how law and health issues can overlap. Big Nose Kate Elder, a famous madam and friend of the notorious killer Doc Holliday, had an outbreak of syphilis in her brothel. Elder chose to temporarily close her business and get medical help for her women, even though the local police were likely to brush off such health problems. A lot of people heard about this strong stance, which made people more aware of the health risks in brothels and indirectly helped change how people feel about them. Ethnicity. The Wild West's illegal activities at night were not a single thing. They were a complicated web of different cultures that connected lines from all over the world. Women from different cultures, like Chinese, African American, Native American, and Latina added their own unique styles to entertainment, which changed the Wild West in many ways. During the gold rush in the middle of the 1800s, a lot of Chinese people came to the United States, and many of the women who came went to bars. African American women, who were looking for opportunities in a society based on race, also left their mark on the twilight parlors. Mary Ellen Pleasant, also known as Mamie Pleasant, moved to San Francisco during the gold rush and became a successful businesswoman. She used her money to fight for civil rights. It's not clear what her connection was to the world of nightclubs, but her story is an important part of the bigger story of how African American women dealt with social problems during this time. In the same way, Native American women were deeply woven into the fabric of culture. Latule's story stands out because she is a Mexican American woman with possible Native American roots. She ran one of the most famous parlors in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the middle of the 1800s. Her real name was Maria Gertrudis Barcelo. She was a smart gambler who used her money to have an effect on local politics, which helped mix cultures on the border. The Latina women of the night left a lasting mark on the time. Lola Montes, a famous dancer with Irish and Spanish roots, was one of the most notable and innovative of these women. Even though she wasn't a lady of the night, her risky behavior and scandalous relationships were similar to the story in the room. Lola Montes, who was famous for her daring spider dance, added a touch of the exotic to the night's tableau. She broke the rules of traditional wooing and added to the cultural history of the Wild West. Marriages. As an upper-class madam in the Wild West, one of the best things about your job was the chance to meet rich people who came to your parlors. At this strange meeting point of social classes, madams and otherwise good guys would sometimes get married. There were many reasons for these marriages, such as to protect the madam legally and improve her image as a good wife. Legends of America says that famous lawman Wyatt Earp was married to prostitute Maddie Block before he married Josephine Marcus. This is a good example of this. Not only did these ties bring them closer together personally, but they also helped them avoid legal problems by using the husband's high social status. Madame Gabrielle Dolly Y carefully chose many partners to marry in Arizona so that they could help her with her business. This plan helped her deal with the challenges of her job while taking advantage of the protection that powerful partners offered. Trivia Library says that San Francisco's famous Madame Tessie Wall went above and beyond in her search for a husband. She made an effort to marry Frank Daru, one of her donors. Daru helped keep Wall safe from the risks of the underground, even though their marriage wasn't always easy. Even though society didn't approve of these kinds of relationships, some men were able to hide their unmarried partners from everyone. Like in the case of Tessie Wall, the bond between a madam and her well-connected husband can be unstable. Even though they broke up in the end, Wall even shot Daru and said it was out of love. These relationships showed how complicated love and loyalty can be in such an unusual marriage. Daru lived through the encounter, which showed how tragic their personal ties were. Maddie Silks. Maddie Silks, a famous Wild West woman, changed Denver in a way that will never be forgotten. Maddie got her start in the business when she was young. She became a madam when she was only 19. Before she settled down in Denver, her job took her to several towns and brothels in Springfield, Dodge City, and Georgetown. It became famous that Maddie was not only active in the field, but also smart when it came to business. She was a real businesswoman and became famous for her creative ways of marketing, like putting together fancy parades to show off the women she hired. The Market Street brothel became very popular, second only to the famous House of Mirrors. This was due to her hard work. In 1898, Maddie didn't let competition stop her from doing business as usual. She finally bought the House of Mirrors in 1997 after the owner died. The story of the rumored fight Maddie Silks had with Kate Fulton, another brothel owner, is an interesting part of her life. Yes, there was a real fight between two women. It was a famous event in the history of the Wild West. Folklore tells of a fierce battle for control of the company and for Court Thompson, Maddie's lover. As things got worse, the two women decided to fight it out in a duel. Unfortunately, both guns missed their targets. but Maddie's bullet hit court by mistake. Julia Bulette. There is a fascinating story about Madame Julia Bulette that makes her seem like a well-known figure in the Nevada mining town of Virginia City. In a show of huge respect, men in the town dubbed her the Queen of the 4th of July Parade in 1861. She was put on top of the town's brand new fire truck, which was a nice thing to do since she was an official member of the fire department. There were tales and stories about Julia, even while she was alive, that made her story very mysterious. At first, it was said that she was from England, but now experts think she was born in Mississippi. Historical records show that she came to Virginia City soon after the Comstock lode was found and was one of the few single women there. Not much is known about her early life. It's thought that she moved to the city to become more active, and the men in the neighborhood quickly became interested in her because she was so friendly. People know Julia for more than just her work in the red light area. There are stories about how she actively fought fires, helped the sick, and gave homeless people a place to stay. Julia became well known after she opened her own business in the city's red light district. Her company grew very quickly and had to work hard to compete with the best in town. Her huge popularity and success as a madam showed how good she was at her job, solidifying her reputation as a respected and important woman in Virginia City. In 1867, Julia's life took a terrible turn when she was attacked and hurt. The person who broke in killed her and took her things, shocking everyone in the city. Virginia City was shocked to hear of her quick death, and her funeral was attended by hundreds of people, showing how much the community loved and respected her. It's still interesting to learn about Julia Bulette's sudden death if you're interested in the mysterious and dangerous Wild West era. It shows how much of an effect a brilliant woman had on history. Belle Brezing. Belle Brezing had a hard life from the start, but she overcame it with determination and creativity, making her life better. Even though things were bad and she didn't have many options, Belle was born in Lexington, Kentucky in 1860 to a mother named Sarah Ann Cox, who was having a hard time. Her early years were marked by a rough home life. Sarah married George Brazier, but George was a drinker and left the family, leaving Sarah and her daughter to support themselves. At the same time that she worked as a prostitute and a tailor, Sarah did anything to make ends meet. During her teenage years, Belle was involved in a complicated love triangle that ended in tragedy, with one guy dead, another on the run, and Belle pregnant. Even though she married the father, she lost hope and got caught in a complicated web. Belle continued to live with her mother after giving birth, but things got even worse when Sarah died a few months later, which caused the landlord to take back their house. Because of these issues, Belle chose to work in the field. She quickly became well known in the area, and she worked in a brothel that was kept in one of Mary Todd Lincoln's old homes. Belle became one of the most famous madams in the Wild West very quickly. When she went out on her own, she built a loyal following of people who not only used her services, but also put money into her houses. Belle's buildings were known for being clean, even though they were used for business purposes. This earned her the nickname, the most orderly of the disorderly houses. Belle was a very smart businesswoman. She let her workers keep most of their salaries while making money from selling liquor, especially the best champagne, which made her very rich. Her impact spread to many brothels, making her a well-known figure in the business. Because of Prohibition, Belle's stores in Kentucky had to close. Even though it was hard, she stayed at the last brothel she ran, even though she was addicted to morphine and probably had uterine cancer at the same time. When she was at her best, Belle was known as the perfect lady of the Ken, with a big heart. She helped local organizations and told a complicated story of overcoming hardships to succeed. People who make their own way in the hard Wild West are admired for their determination, as shown in her story. Decline. The closing of Western bordellos marked the end of an age and cast long shadows over places that were once famous and almost mythical in the Wild West. As the wheel of time turns, so does the history of these businesses. Their fall was caused by changes in society, government actions, and the economy. In the West's dusty streets, the winds of social change began to whistle as the 20th century went on. The Victorian era ended and the Progressive era began. The Victorian era was known for its strict morals and limits on love. On stage, powerful women like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton fought for women's rights and changed how people thought about the ladies of the night. The women's suffrage movement, which was successful, changed how people thought about women's freedom and worth. At the same time, there was a lot of action in the legislature, which helped bring down the nocturnal nests. Catherine Bont Davis, who is the Vice Commissioner of Chicago, became well known as the leader of the charge. In 1911, the committee she led put out a report that led to a crackdown on brothels across the whole state. People were becoming more and more angry at these places, and in 1910, the Mann Act was passed. This was a federal law meant to stop forced labor in the commercial sex industry, but it had a lot of negative effects on brothel companies. The last few years of the Wild West brothel era were also affected by the economy in a big way. In 1896, gold was found in Alaska, which changed the population as people looking for wealth moved further north. This made many Western brothels lose customers. Also, when the Great Depression started in the late 1920s, possible customers lost their jobs and money, which was a terrible blow to the sector. A well-known woman from Helena, Montana, named Jo Hensley, is a good example of these changes. Her business started to slow down because of problems with the government, changes in society, and fewer people looking for money. Chi-Town Joe, who used to be an important person in Helena's town, saw her once rich business go out of business, which is a problem that many madams are having at the moment. The setting sun didn't mean the end of these businesses, though. It meant the start of a new phase of life. The traditional brothel age ended, but its effects can be heard throughout history and can be seen in many parts of modern life. In some parts of Nevada, licensed companies like these are still open for business today. We hope you like this video. Watch another video here.